Nightreign's launch went exactly the way anyone would have guessed. After a masterpiece mainline title, it was obvious Nightreign could never fill the gap. But personally, when it came out, I spent my entire day playing this game, and all I could say is, I love it. Obviously, it has a lot of issues. Balance in solo play is non-existent. I spent less time at rune level 1 consort Radahn than I did soloing any of the Night Lords. But all it takes to fix the balance is a single patch, of course. Another problem is the linear expeditions. Once you make it to the day 3, you have seen everything that is related to that particular Night Lord. It is always the same bosses and everything is pretty much the same. Also, while random weapons are fun, boons, landmarks, bonuses, and buffs feel a bit underwhelming. But despite all this, I still love this game. It's an entirely different title compared to the previous ones, yet it still has the same From Software charm I always appreciated. This alone got me thinking. When I think of my favorite Souls game, I don't have one. I can't pick my favorite, just like I can't pick my favorite Lord of the Rings movie or a book. At its core, every Souls game carries the same model despite their differences. I love Dark Souls and its slower gameplay just as much as I love Sekiro's rhythm-based action-oriented combat. I enjoy slow, chill moments and exploration in Elden Ring, but the non-stop movement and fast gameplay in Nightreign are also charming. I appreciate Dark Souls 2 for its amazing world, lore, and incredible PvP system, but I can't place it above or below any other Souls game. What makes a Souls game special to me is the steps they take to bring these worlds to life. It's obvious Nightreign is a side project, mostly built with reused assets and bosses, a way to test mechanics and models for their next main title. But there's still more personality in it than most modern games. If you look at Halo, a game that scared Sony so much that they founded Demon's Souls as a competitor. It no longer has a personality. For the past 10 years, it was nothing but a Call of Duty clone. Assassin's Creed is no longer a game. They make it grindy and intentionally make the side content boring just to trick a handful of players into buying experience boost in a single player game. Dragon Age, once the spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate and one of the most influential RPGs of its time, is now just a self-insert fantasy of a group of entitled writers. There are so many examples, but the point is, I'm just glad Souls games are essentially what they were 16 years ago. Quick disclaimer, I'm talking about the core of the game and not the gameplay. Sure, Nightreign borrows a lot from other games, and at times it feels like a Monster Hunter game where you're the prey instead of the hunter. If I only rated the game based on gameplay, I would say it's an 8 out of 10 at best, because it has some serious issues, but they don't really bother me because From Software isn't known for their live service battleground roguelike games. I know this game exists to support the next main title, both in terms of experimenting with the features and helping with the financials. When I entered the roundtable hold for the first time in this game, a beautiful soundtrack accompanied this cozy fortress. It's obvious this wasn't just a quick cash grab, but another passion project. All the playable characters are hanging around in the round table, minding their own businesses. A cute little jar drawing his reactions on a board. It brought me back to 2014 when I was exploring Majula for the first time. I probably spent 20 minutes checking every single corner, finding similarities between games. It was once again refreshing to play a modern game that focuses on art direction rather than graphical realism. After playing so many new releases with blurry ghosting textures and never-ending stutters, it was nice to enjoy a clean, beautiful game with no performance issues. This game is by no means perfect. It has a lot of negative reviews, many of which focus on valid points once you filter out all the rage bait reviews trying to farm clown awards. It's unbalanced and difficult for most people. After experiencing all the casual friendly changes in Elden Ring, I can see how punishing this game will be for a significant portion of the player base. Personally, I always play Souls games solo. The only time I interact with other players is when I'm invading or being invaded. Naturally, on my first attempt, I started a solo journey. It was brutal and difficult, but after a couple of failed attempts, I finally beat the first boss. And it was definitely a journey. Elden Ring kind of killed the multiplayer culture Dark Souls built over the years, so I was hesitant to try multiplayer session. But after an expedition with 2 other people, it turned out I was just overreacting. Playing with 2 others was just as fun. There's no voice chat, and if you ask me, that's what makes Souls multiplayer charming. There's no angry teenager yelling into his $5 microphone. No strategies, no discussions, someone marks a location and you all just agree to go there and clear it. On my first final boss attempt, we had a player who left the game after dying twice during day 1. Obviously, having to rely on random people will occasionally cause problems, but I only encountered one rage quitter so far. And my experience was mostly positive. People usually followed the marks and there was always decent team play in expeditions. But just because I didn't have a problem doesn't mean everything is fine. There will be frustrating parts, like when you drop an item for your teammate but don't really have a convenient way to tell them. You just mark the item and point down using gestures and hope they see it. I still think this game can be perfectly enjoyable without voice chat, and there's something I genuinely like about it. You start spinning around, mashing the guard button, throwing out some gestures, and that's the extent of communication in almost all Souls games. It's not ideal, but when you're just playing with two strangers you will never see again, there's a certain charm in that lack of communication. When you look at most Souls-likes, with few exceptions, boss design tends to lack creativity. Bosses often end up as big scary knights in edgy armor. They are just special enemies with special health bars waiting in a fancy room for no reason. While Nightreign was disappointing in terms of new boss variety, the existing ones are visually stunning. At least most of them. It's clear in Nightreign that you don't really have time to stop and enjoy what's happening around you, but I still appreciated the number of new bosses that were introduced. But not all of them, obviously. Not gonna lie, I actually find it hilarious that they looked into all the feedback about Elden Beast's fight and they made an even more annoying version of him. The design is fine, Elden Beast was always a gorgeous boss, and it's no exception this time. In this particular encounter, air bubbles were rising as the skybox slowly shifted into an underwater-like atmosphere. Soundtrack was deep and unclear, as if the sound were escaping from a vessel trapped deep beneath the sea. Each note carried a mysterious, terrifying impression, but overall, the way soundtrack described the boss was telling you it isn't evil. Maris was just following its nature. Boss's moveset and attacks are as mesmerizing as they are annoying. First time we fought Maris, it took us about 9 minutes to finally take it down, because we couldn't figure out the openings. It felt like the boss was just randomly flying around and we were just lucky to land a few hits. Maris is probably the easiest Night Lord in the game, but I still find it impressive how much personality they managed to give a boss with reused design and the shared boss arena. Fight itself is annoying, you spend 10 minutes running after something you can barely hit with melee weapons, but from an art direction standpoint, it is gorgeous. And leaning into incredible art direction wasn't exclusive to Maris. This trend carries across all the other Night Lords. Noster feels like a magical creature straight out of a fairy tale. The mod especially reminds me of the beautiful but annoying Moonlight Butterfly from Dark Souls 1. Fight is tough, especially when the scorpion randomly roars without any build-up or warning. But the soundtrack is amazing. In such a tough fight against what's essentially an insect duo, this soundtrack might actually be the best one in the entire game. During the phase transition, fallen leaves cover the desolate landscape and the skybox slowly shifts. Crimson lights on the horizon turn into cold blue thread of light, almost like the beasts are being freed from the influence that made them hostile. And this is what I love about From Software games and their major bosses. They are not just fancy big enemies with oversized health bars, there's always something going on beneath the surface with each Night Lord. What makes these games beautiful is that they are not afraid to imitate art or to show personality, especially now in such times where writers are too scared to show emotions. Everything has to be sarcastic or a one-liner in modern entertainment. Look at Forspoken or that Star Wars game that I can't even remember the name of. Writers are so afraid of genuine emotions that most characters always end up as cheap, annoying Dante or Tony Stark clones. I love From Software's art direction and writing because they are not scared of getting criticized by chronically online Twitter blue checks or Reddit karma worshippers. Gameplay-wise, there's a lot left to be desired. Everything is designed to be much faster, but some key animations still have the same timings they had in Elden Ring, and they just don't fit in this game. The recovery time after drinking Estus or finishing an attack is too slow compared to everything else happening around you. When the game is all about speed, some attacks like arrow heavies feel too slow. Game would have massively benefited from recovery timing similar to Dark Souls 3's daggers and quick step mechanics. Another issue which hits me hard because I'm not used to group PvE in Souls games is how unpredictable the bosses become when playing with two other people. You never know whether the boss will suddenly shift the aggro to you or not. A small audio cue when the enemy fixates on you would be a welcome quality of life change, so at least I know boss is about to turn back and attack me. It's a problem when in a co-op focused game fighting the final boss by yourself is infinitely easier than doing it with others. The first time I reached the final boss with a team, it was a disaster. We spent the entire time running after the boss while it was chasing our Iron Eye. There was so much running that we constantly took unnecessary hits while chasing it down. It was frustrating and it completely went against what makes Souls combat fun. There's a reason why Sekiro and Dark Souls 3 are considered to be best when it comes to boss battles. A Souls boss is fun when you're within the action. It doesn't translate well when you're just chasing the boss all the time only to get hit by something random. All things considered, Nightreign is an okay game. There are already some improvements over Elden Ring, like camera in some boss fights is infinitely better. During certain fights, if the boss jumps too high, the camera quickly zooms out to catch the boss. Visually, it is one of the best From Software has ever made, and it still prioritizes art direction, and it still imitates art. And newly designed bosses are on par with any major boss from the older title. I still think new bosses are more fun in solo expeditions, but they are well made and it is clear they were made with care and passion. In the end, it's a great game with problems that can be fixed if the developers support it properly. Roguelike aspect still needs a lot of reinforcement, runs feel too identical, which is not really acceptable for a roguelike game. Buffs, boons and bonuses are not interesting. I don't really care about +1 to physical attacks or 15% magic resistance. Random stat boosts don't translate well in a roguelike. That stuff only really works in action RPGs like Path of Exile. That being said, there's one boon I actually like. It gives you a small chance to insta-kill enemies, and it even works on some lesser bosses. It's not amazing, but at least it does something noticeable. This game needs more boons like that, things that will affect the game directly and not just your stat sheet. Nightreign isn't a perfect roguelike and it's not a Souls game in the same way the classics were. In its current state, it will probably offer you 15 or 20 hours of content if your goal is to beat all the new bosses. But for a roguelike, it doesn't really offer the replayability you would expect from the genre. It's definitely a great game, but you need to know what you're getting into before buying it. Personally, I recommend it. This game is still beautiful with a lot of passion behind it, but if you have doubts, wait for a sale, a content update or the upcoming DLC. Anyway, I just wanted to quickly share my thoughts on the game, and I will be working on some lore content related to Nightreign. And if you enjoy mediocre Souls content, consider giving a like and sub, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!